A little boy sells his only toy car at a flea market to buy medicine for his sick mom, only for a billionaire CEO passing by to notice him. What he does next leaves the boy and his mom in complete shock. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you're watching us from, and please like this video to support the channel. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. Owen held the small, chipped toy car in his hands, running his thumb over its once bright red paint, now faded from years of love and adventure. It had been his favorite for as long as he could remember, a gift from his mom on his 4th birthday. Back then, she had been healthy, her laughter filling their tiny apartment like sunlight spilling through the curtains. But things had changed. Now, her laughter was rare, replaced by tired smiles and quiet winces when she thought he wasn't looking. The doctors had given her a prescription, but the cost of the medicine was more than they had. Owen had overheard her talking to the pharmacist, her voice strained, her hands gripping the counter as she asked if there was a cheaper option. There wasn't. So here he was, standing at the flea market under the shadow of an old canopy, gripping his toy like it was the most important thing in the world. Because, to him, it was. It had always been. But not anymore. Not when his mom needed that medicine. He had taken his tiny collection of toys and placed them neatly on an old crate, but it was clear what the real treasure was: the car. His mom had told him to stay home while she rested, but Owen had made up his mind. He wasn't going to sit and watch her get worse. People passed by, some barely glancing his way, others giving him a quick smile before moving on. His heart sank with each person that walked past without stopping. He tried calling out, his small voice lost in the chatter of the market. "Toy car for sale! It's really special!" A man with a scruffy beard stopped and looked at the items before shaking his head. "How much for the car, kid?" Owen straightened. $10. The man let out a low whistle. "That's a steep price for a toy car." "It's important," Owen said, his voice serious. "It's my best one." The man hesitated, then sighed. "Sorry, kid. Can't do 10. He walked away, leaving Owen gripping the toy even tighter. Minutes passed. The sun grew hotter. Owen could feel his stomach twisting with worry. What if no one bought it? What if he had to go home empty-handed? The thought made his throat tighten. Then, a shadow fell over him. Owen looked up to see a tall man in a sleek gray suit standing in front of him. He had the kind of presence that made people move out of his way without him saying a word. His dark hair was neatly styled, and he held a cup of coffee in one hand while scrolling through his phone with the other. But something made him pause. Maybe it was the way Owen stood there, determined yet small, or the way his tiny hands clutched the car like it was a lifeline. Whatever it was, the man put his phone away and crouched down to eye level. "What are you selling?" Owen straightened, his heart pounding. "My car." He held it out carefully, almost reverently. The man studied it, his sharp blue eyes flicking between the toy and Owen's face. "How much?" Owen hesitated. Should he lower the price? Would this man walk away like the others? But no, he couldn't. He needed the money. $10, he said firmly. The man raised an eyebrow. "That must be one special car." Owen nodded. "It is. But my mom needs medicine, and we don't have enough money." The words were simple, spoken without self-pity, but they landed heavily in the air between them. The man's expression shifted slightly, something unreadable flickering across his face. He glanced down at the car again, then at Owen, then reached into his jacket pocket. "I'll take it," he said. Owen's breath caught. "Really?" The man nodded, but instead of pulling out his wallet, he took out a slim checkbook. He wrote something down, tore out the check, and handed it to Owen along with the car. "Here." Owen blinked, confused. He had expected a few crumpled bills, maybe a $10 bill if he was lucky. But when he looked down, his breath hitched. $10,000. His fingers trembled as he stared at the number. He wasn't sure he had ever seen that many zeros in one place before. His stomach flipped, and for the first time since coming to the market, he felt the sting of tears press against his eyes. He swallowed hard. This is too much," he whispered. The man's voice was calm but firm. "It's exactly what it's worth." Owen didn't know what to say. He felt like his heart was about to burst out of his chest. "Thank you," he breathed. "Thank you so much." The man gave a small nod. "What's your name, kid?" "Owen." "Well, Owen, you take that check to your mom, okay?" Owen clutched it tightly, as if afraid it would disappear. "I will." The man hesitated for a brief moment before standing up and ruffling Owen's hair lightly. "Take care of her." With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd before Owen could even ask his name. Owen didn't waste another second. He grabbed his other toys, stuffed them into his backpack, and ran all the way home, his small legs pumping as fast as they could. When he burst through the apartment door, panting and flushed, Emily sat up from the couch, startled. "Owen! Where have you been?" He practically flew into her arms, thrusting the check into her hands. "Mom! We can buy the medicine! We can buy all of it!" Emily took the paper, her brow furrowed in confusion, but when she saw the amount, she gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Owen, where did you get this?" "I sold my car," he said simply. Tears welled in her eyes as she pulled him close, holding him so tightly he could barely breathe. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You didn't have to do that." "But I wanted to," he said, his voice muffled against her shoulder. "I just want you to be okay." She pulled back, looking at him with so much love it made his chest ache. "I am okay, Owen. Because I have you." That night, as he lay in bed, he thought about the man at the market. The man who had given him more than just money. He had given him hope. And Owen had a feeling he would see him again. Emily sat at the kitchen table long after Owen had fallen asleep, staring at the check as if it might vanish the moment she blinked. $10,000. It was an impossible number, one that didn't belong in her hands, yet there it was, real and solid between her trembling fingers. She should have been overjoyed, but a nagging doubt settled deep in her chest. Who was this man? Why would a stranger give such an extravagant amount for a toy car? It didn't make sense. Nothing about it did. But then she looked at Owen, his small body curled under the blankets, breathing softly, and she knew she couldn't afford to question a miracle. The next morning, she made the call. The pharmacy confirmed that the prescription was ready, and within hours, for the first time in months, Emily held the medicine in her hands. Relief washed over her in a way she hadn't felt in years. She had spent so long carrying the weight of worry, so long pretending to be strong for Owen, but now, for the first time, she allowed herself to believe things might get better. And they did. The improvement wasn't immediate, but it was steady. Within a week, her energy started returning. The constant ache in her bones dulled, the exhaustion that had once dragged her down like quicksand slowly began to lift. She no longer had to sit down after climbing the stairs, no longer had to mask her pain when Owen reached for her hand. Her laughter returned, real and unforced, filling their small apartment with warmth once more. With her strength returning, so did her determination. She wasn't the kind of person who could accept a gift like this without doing something in return. The first thing she did was call every place she had previously applied to, and this time, with a renewed sense of hope, she secured a job at a small design firm. It wasn't glamorous, and it certainly wasn't high-paying, but it was stable, and stability was more than she had dared to hope for. Owen beamed when she told him. "That's awesome, Mom," he said, his brown eyes shining with pride. "Now we won't have to worry anymore, right?" Emily brushed his hair back and kissed his forehead. "Right, baby." But even as she said it, her thoughts drifted back to the man at the flea market, the one who had made all of this possible. Who was he? Would she ever see him again? James Reeves hadn't been able to get the little boy out of his head. It had started as a simple act of impulse. A child standing in the middle of a flea market, desperately selling a toy car, had caught his attention. But now, days later, he found himself thinking about that moment more than he cared to admit. He hadn't bought the toy for the money. $10,000 was nothing to him, but the boy's sincerity had unsettled something deep inside him. There had been a raw, quiet kind of desperation in the kid's voice, not for himself, but for his mother. It wasn't something James was used to seeing. It wasn't something he had ever experienced. He had grown up in wealth, surrounded by privilege, yet somehow, that little boy had carried more strength than most of the executives James worked with. And now, he found himself wondering if the mother had actually used the money. Had it helped? Was she better? James wasn't the type of man to concern himself with strangers, but for some reason, this was different. So, one evening after work, he told his driver to take a detour. The address on the check had been for verification purposes, nothing more, but he had memorized it without meaning to. It wasn't hard to find the building, a modest apartment complex tucked between the edges of the city. As the car pulled up, he hesitated. He had no real reason to be here. What was he going to do, knock on the door and announce himself? That was ridiculous. Before he could change his mind, movement near the entrance caught his eye. A woman and a small boy were stepping out, the child tugging on her hand, laughing. His laughter was familiar. James recognized the tousled brown hair, the same determination in his eyes. It was him. But it wasn't the boy that made James pause, it was the mother. Emily. She was nothing like he had pictured. When he had imagined her, she had been frail, exhausted, the way Owen had described her. But the woman in front of him was radiant. She still had a slight thinness to her frame, as if she were recovering from something, but there was color in her cheeks, a life in her expression that hadn't been there before. She was beautiful in a way that was effortless, in a way that made something shift in his chest before he could stop it. James wasn't a man who second-guessed himself, but in that moment, he did. He had planned to check in, to satisfy his curiosity. But now, watching her laugh as she knelt to tie Owen's shoe, he suddenly felt like an intruder. And yet, before he could turn away, Owen spotted him. The little boy's eyes widened, and before James could even think, Owen broke into a run, his small legs carrying him across the pavement. "Hey!" he called out, waving his arms. "It's you!" Emily turned at the sound of Owen's voice, her brows furrowing in confusion as she followed his gaze. When she saw James, she froze. For a second, no one moved. Then, James stepped forward, unsure of what he was going to say, but before he could speak, Owen blurted out, "Mom, this is the guy. The one who bought my car." Emily's breath caught. James extended his hand, the corner of his mouth tilting slightly. "James Reeves." Emily hesitated before shaking it, her fingers warm against his. "Emily Harper." There was something in her eyes when she looked at him, something where